Hello and welcome to Books to Last, the podcast that challenges readers to pick the only 5 books they may take with them when cast away to a mystery remote location. As ever, I'm joined by a book-loving guest, and this episode I'm joined by Kirsty. Welcome, Kirsty. It's so good to have you on the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. Thanks for asking.
Thank you so much for giving up your time. So, for the benefit of our listeners, why don't you talk a little bit about yourself and books and reading and why we're all here today?
So my name's Kirsty, as you just said. In the sort of local area of Staffordshire, I'm kind of known as the Dyslexic Yogi, which was kind of how I branded myself, being a yoga teacher. And then where reading comes into it, because of my dyslexia, my love for reading, I feel like school kind of put me off a little bit, and I didn't rediscover that love until I was an adult. And I'm one of those people who needs a little bit of accountability. I need people to talk about books and things like that. So I came up with an idea probably over 6 years ago that didn't kind of happen until about 4 years ago, about running a ideally it was a dyslexic-friendly book club. It's turned into the No Pressure Book Club, really. So we're called Dook Club, and we just meet and we talk about what we've been reading. A bit similar, actually, to how your podcast is. There's no rhyme or reason. Mm-hmm. People read fiction, non-fiction. People listen to books. Because I just don't like the conventional book club where you all have to read the same thing.
It's ever so funny because before I found out about Dook Club, I remember speaking to my husband because we'll lull into silence, and then one of us will just like pipe up with an idea that we've had. And I turned around and it wasn't so much an idea, it's just like, I'd really like to join a book club, but as soon as someone tells me to read something, I don't want to read that particular thing, even if I was planning on reading it right up until the moment they said it. And I'm quite bad with following that, and I'm never in the mood for the books that book clubs always seem to pick or read, so I've never really been able to stick with one. So I said to him, I was like, I could just do with a book club that's kind of like BYOB, like you bring your own book and you just talk about that and no one else has to have read it.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's just what I need. And he goes, well, why don't you start? I'm just like, no, because I'm not good at starting communities. I was like, I'm just going to sit and wait until someone else does it. And then lo and behold, someone did. So you know what? Good things do come to those who wait.
No, I'm so glad I did do it. And it's 4 years old this month, which just is crazy to me. And like you just said, it's not an overly original idea. And I've heard of other people that have said they want something similar. It's just, like you say, putting the energy into it. And it has taken a lot of energy. But I've got such a lovely community of dookers, as we call them. And there's some that help a little bit more now with the organising side. Just so we can put more events on, because there's only one of me. I can't do every meeting under the sun. And the fact that it started in January 2020, going into lockdown, and it's still here today. I'm just pleased off. Yeah.
Yeah, and another gift to me in my life, Dook Club has encouraged me to adopt the Stoke pronunciation of the double O. Because, okay, so a little bit of a background for anyone who's not familiar with Stoke-on-Trent. So we're actually our accent tends to adopt a oo sound for the double O. So most people pronounce it book, look and cook instead of book, look and cook. It's a thing of great debate amongst people who disagree, and people always like to pick up on it. I've always said book, look and cook, not because I've got any particularly strong feelings about it, because my family are from Yorkshire, so they all say book, look and cook. Therefore, I picked that up as a child, and it's very hard to drop that once you get to adulthood. So yeah, a lot of people in my life always point it out. But with Dook Club, you kind of have to pronounce it with the 2 O's. Because otherwise it's Dook Club, which is a completely different thing.
Well, yeah, and some people do say Dook Club, and I don't correct them because, my reading isn't the strongest with being dyslexic. And I'm a bit like yourself, because although I've lived in Stoke most of my life, because my stepdad's from Stoke, my parents are actually from Scotland and Ireland, so my dad's like, she's got an English accent. But he was the one that actually came up with the name, because I was like, I want, a dyslexic friendly book club, what do I call it? And he was like, well, you get your B's and D's mixed up, so it'd have to be. He must have said Duke. Yeah. So it's just always stuck as, but yeah, it is funny. But I do think most people just think I'm spelling book wrong, and they're like, she runs a book club and she can't spell book.
Yeah, it's funny. When I first joined Dook Club, so I did join Dook Club quite recently. I mean, many listeners might have noticed the large number of Dookers that have come onto the podcast, because they're a terribly supportive bunch, honestly. Very, very, very nice people, and all very keen to talk about books, which obviously we really like on the podcast. But when I first joined, I basically just referred to it as book club because it's one of those things, it's like I don't try and over-explain things to my husband. He just basically needs the bare details. He's like, right, what is it? Where are you going? When are you going? I'll see you in a bit then. So I just referred to it as book club, but I'd been putting it in the calendar as Dook Club, and he saw it and he cottoned on straight away. He was just like, because he knew that the premise was dyslexic friendly.
I thought he was just like,
no, and as soon as he saw it, he was just like, as soon as he saw it, he was just like, like with the like a miss, and he got it straight away, and I was like,
that's nice.
See, I was like, see, it's
can't
clever.
take credit for that one, but yeah, no, I'm glad it does come across sometimes. But yeah, between this podcast and that club, my TBR list is getting insane.
Yeah, it does ever seem to grow. I mean, I started the podcast because I really just wanted to talk to people about books, but like obviously the unintended consequences of that is just that I get told about really great books.
I feel like we've done the same thing, just in different scenarios. You've done a podcast and I've run a club.
Well, it's funny because I don't know if you felt this, but I don't know, because none of my immediate friendship circle, even though I do have some good friends who are big readers, none of my immediate like support network, I suppose, were massive readers, at least not in the way that I read, or they didn't like to read the same books as me, or it wasn't something that we talked about in our regular like life. And because of that, I ended up finding a lot of it on the internet, which is great, but you don't get the chance for like long form conversations very often. Mm-hmm. And I had this really strange feeling of actually feeling quite isolated, because even though I spoke to all these people all over the world who did it, I kind of felt like I didn't have anyone within arm's reach sort of thing to speak about books with. So finding Dook Club was really, really amazing, because I suddenly sort of stumbled onto this whole community network that was literally within my very own city. And yeah, it was amazing. So it's very great. And also, even if you're not local, a great follow on Instagram I have previously plugged. Okay, so that's you and sort of reading in the book club and stuff. What kind of books do you like to read then?
It really varies, to be honest, which is probably why I wouldn't fit in with a conventional book club. So I tend to have an audiobook on the go and a physical book. I'm a big advocate for audiobooks. In fact, one of the members at the club talks about, I know there's this whole debate whether it's not reading, but it's been proven it is, and it uses that part of the brain. So I quite like non-fiction in an audio, not always, but so for instance, I'm listening to, I'm so bad with surnames. Who's the singer in the Foo Fighters? David
Grohl.
There we go. His book, everyone's probably like rolling their eyes at me now going, oh my God, she forgot Grohl. I'm listening to his book at the moment, and I also like a good sort of, I've listened to like a lot of yoga books and mindfulness books and things like that. And then in regards to actually physically reading, I've discovered thriller in the past year because of many of the Dookers. I love a bit of smut. I know, I'm sorry. I love a little bit of smut.
Absolutely no need to apologise.
Romantics, anything like that. Just something that keeps me reading personally, because I have as well in the last year taken on that it's okay to leave a book behind. It's okay not to. There's far too many books on my shelf. And it's okay. So yeah, that's kind of quite... I think the only thing I really don't like reading is anything... Not historical fiction. I don't mind historical stuff, but that's definitely something I have to listen to.
Yeah.
In sort of... when that comes to like political books, because I don't know what's going on in the world the best time, so to read about it would just confuse me.
So weirdly, politics is one of those sort of niche, like one of my sort of pet interests. It's one of my quote unquote special areas of interest. And I do like to follow political news. Weirdly, I'm not very tribal with politics. Like I don't sort of often, I have views obviously, but generally I don't get involved with it to take a side or have an argument. I just find the mechanics of it really interesting, and how it works and how it works differently in different countries and that sort of thing.
I must admit that is interesting, and I do like hearing about different cultures and countries. And
but I don't read books about it very often. Very rarely. It's very strange. I listen to podcasts about politics.
For me, reading is a little bit of escapism. So if I'm maybe... And also, sometimes I have to put a book down because it's maybe not right for me at that time, when there may be something... So it's, as long as I'm enjoying it, I'll read it.
Yeah, I think with most genres, it's one of those, it's finding the right book in that genre for you. And then also...
There's so many genres. I can't keep... people say things to me and I'm like, do I like that kind of book? I actually don't know.
Yeah, and then it's also, like you say, the right time. The right time is always sometimes tricky, because I don't know, there have been times in my life when I've read something that's been amazing and I've tried to go back to it later on, especially series. And once I'm out of it, I'm like, it's almost as if my brain's checked out of it, and I'm like, I'm out. That's it. I can't go back now.
Funnily enough, one of the books I'm going to talk about comes from a series, and I had to re-listen because I thought I'll just do an audiobook because I have not got time to read them because typically her newest book came out in October, and I was like, I can't remember, but I remember being really annoyed when the book finished. That it was like, because when a book ends in a cliffhanger, then you have to wait 12 months for the next book, and you're like, yeah, I'm not going to remember I don't remember what happened yesterday, never mind what happened in the book I read last year.
Yeah, I've slept since then. If I didn't write it down, it doesn't exist to me. Yeah, I'm like that. I read 4.5 Game of Thrones books, and I tried to restart the 5th one. And I was like, got to the first chapter, I was like, I don't remember the character name for that particular point of view. I was like, I do not remember who this character is. Don't remember where they are. Don't remember what they're doing. And then I kind of pushed on for about 3 or 4 chapters, and I was like, I have not the slightest clue what's going on. So I was like, I'm going to have to start the whole series all over again. I was like, and then try to get to it again. I was like, I haven't got the time for that. They're all 1,000 pages each. I'll get to it eventually.
God, 1,000 pages.
It's because some of them are split into 2, but I was like, you know what? I will reread Game of Thrones when George R.R. Martin releases Winds of Winter. When he releases the 6th book, which has been about, I think it's like 20 years coming at this point.
Is it right?
Yeah. When he releases it, I will then reread the series. But until then, I was like, otherwise, because I've already been told the ending of that 5th one is like horrible, because it leaves you on this huge cliffhanger with no answers, and it's like...
Oh, that unsettles me. I kind of... There'll be people listening to this podcast now going, no, I love an open-ended ending.
I don't like open-ended series. I have to have the next one immediately.
Yeah.
Never mind. Anyway, so that's a little bit about what you read generally. We are going to get into your top 5 books that you take with you when cast away. As ever, you get to pick where you be cast away to. Where would you like to be cast away to?
I feel like it probably won't be very original. I feel like people have probably said this many times. I kind of like the idea of the isolated cabin.
Yes.
As long as there is unlimited, tea and coffee, and maybe even a hot tub. Am I allowed that as well?
Of course, all amenities.
And I don't know why, but I think it's the picture. I'm sure I get sick of this and probably regret it, but I'm going to commit. I'm feeling the snowy cabin where I can look out, and I might completely regret this.
I'm having shining thoughts.
Do you know what? Yes, I am. Yeah, basically. Well, that's a real hotel, isn't it? Yeah. Send me that to that hotel.
Fair enough. Whenever people mention the cabins, I like to have this mental image of all the people who've ever come on the podcast and they've picked a cabin in the woods, but they're all cabins in the same woods.
So we're all next door neighbours.
But they're all just spaced apart from each other, so they don't know that the other cabin's
share
there.
The 5 books.
Yeah, it's just quite funny. Just imagining everyone going to they're just in this universe where everyone's gone to the location they've been cast away to.
And the thing is, just because I don't know what's happened to humanity, whether it's I'm the only human out there, but I still like to imagine that I still get my dog and my cat, and my cat's quite happy if he's lying in front of a fire, and the demented Dachshund that you've just met out there, who's currently being occupied by a chew, loves snow, and I just think the idea of
they'd be very happy.
She'd be very happy. Yeah,
they'd be very happy with their surroundings. Okay, so we've set the scene. What is the first book you'd be taking with you?
So, in no particular order, I really don't want to be made to say this author's name, but you'll recognise it because it has been discussed before. Before the Coffee Gets Cold.
Yeah, so I've only recently learned about this book, but for the benefit of listeners.
So, Before the Coffee Gets Cold is about a cafe in Tokyo where you can go back in time. And to be honest, science fiction isn't probably one of my favourite reads. I think if it's done well or done kind of believable, I enjoy it. And it's really strict time travel. So there's certain rules. So you can go back or forward in time. You can only go back, you can't only go back, you can go back or forward. You can only meet people that have been to this particular cafe. Mm-hmm. You can't leave your seat. You can only sit in a particular seat to go back in time. And if you leave it, then you would return back to the present. The seat is only vacated by what I presume is like a ghost. So There's a ghost sitting reading in this cafe. So you'd be sat having your cup of tea, your cup of coffee in this cafe. And when this ghost stands up to go to the toilet, why ghosts need to go to the toilet. I don't know, we just go with it. You can then sit in the seat, and then it has to be poured by a particular family member. They pour the coffee, and you must go back in time and drink your coffee before it gets cold. And then you return. And the other big thing is that you can't change any, like it won't change anything. Yeah. You can't,
the best kind of time travel.
Yeah. So a lot of people, when they hear all the rules, are like, yes, far too much effort. But it's, funnily enough, it was a book that was spoken about really early on in Dook Club. So a few years ago, there was a few of the different Dookers that had read it, and it had this beautiful cover. I know, sucker for a cover.
It is gorgeous.
Really beautiful.
It's a nice
cover.
set.
And I know the first one seems to be everyone's favourite, and that's the one I would take. I think the other one's like When the Memory Fades, and there's another one as well. And I remember being in a bookshop, and starting Dook Club helped me start to get over this fear of buying books, which now I wish I hadn't got over, because now it's a whole different hobby.
That's a problem.
But because I'd been told, because I had such a low reading age, and I used to get so overwhelmed by books. I used to think there would be certain types of books I can read, but I've discovered if I persevere, or if I find the right font, or if I need to get it on Kindle, or if I need to listen to it, there's no stopping to what I can read. And because it's actually a translation, so it's translated from, I'm presuming Japanese, into English. I was getting confused whether it is Japanese, because I know in China it's Mandarin, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's why I was like, is it?
Yeah. I think it's Japanese. Yeah, I'm not a book I've heard of, but not overly familiar with.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So yeah, it's translated, and I was like, oh god, the name's gonna be. But actually, you just go such and such, or you make up the names yourself. And there were lots of little beautiful stories, and it's a book. When you obviously sent me over the email saying what the requirements for the podcast and what it was 5 books and the different rules that come with it that I know everyone that listens probably knows by now. And I was like, so what am I going to take? And I was like, I feel like if it's a book that I read and I still think about it, then that would be a book I'd want to take with me. And that's definitely one that I still think about. So
yeah, it's funny. People always approach it with slightly different. Some people want basically the longest 5 books they've ever really liked.
I thought that was a good way of doing it, to be honest.
So people just go, okay, these are the my favourite books. Like, these are all the books I really like. I'll just pick the 5 that have got the most pages, and then I'm getting the most pages for my for my money. Other people, it's books that they would reread over and over, and they get something different from. Some people, it's just ones that they think about a lot and they really like and would like the chance to reread it. There's no real hard and fast rules on why you choose them, because people, I don't know, they take the desert island metaphor always. Sometimes people just pick their favourite books regardless, and then some people really think about the context as well. I really like seeing how people approach the subject, but this is a book that I didn't know was sci-fi because it's got such a pretty cover. I had assumed that it was poetry because of the title.
I get that,
I saw it in many shops, and I literally never even contemplated picking it up, because the funny thing is I spend a lot of time in bookshops. I very rarely pay attention to what section I'm in. I just look at all the books on the shelf as if I'm in my own shelves at home, which aren't. They're a bit like bookstore organisation methods, but
mine aren't, so you want another one.
But generally, I'm like, I almost don't pay attention to the genre in the same way that, like, I don't read blurbs and I don't read descriptions for TV shows or watch trailers. I kind of go off vibes. I'm very led by vibes.
Yeah, it's very rare I read the back of it, but sometimes I do. And then Nick, who you've had on your podcast, she didn't come up with us, she told me, it was just the sausage jog joining us with a clinky clanky pause, about reading the first sentence of the first chapter. And I was like, well, I quite like that. But yeah, it's definitely one that I recommend to people. I've read the other 3. She's discovered that she's got no room on the settee, so she's gone back out of the room. Not Nick. The dog. People get really confused. I'm having 2 different conversations. But yeah, it's definitely one I recommend to people. I'd say I've read the other 3, but it's probably my favourite. And I know some people have read them and gone, after you've read the first one, they didn't feel the need to read the others, which I do get, but I still enjoy the others for what else they bring. So
yeah, well, that's nice, and a good sci-fi choice to start off with, and also, like you say, very, very pretty. So that's your first book. What's the second book you'll be taking with you?
See, I don't know if you've ever had this before. The second book I'm taking with me, I've never read.
Oh, we have many people sometimes just bring a book at a wild card. They're like, well, I've always wanted to read this and I'll probably like it. It's very risky. I appreciate people who live life like that.
Well, there was nearly I nearly did it with another one because I was like, I want to take a thriller, but I feel like I need to take a thriller I haven't read. So I was going to just pick one of the Duka's favourites, but no, I've this is the only one that I haven't read. So it's called The Light on Life, The Yoga Journey to Wholeness, Inner Peace and Unlimited... Ultimate. Is it ultimate or limited? I always get those ones confused. Ultimate freedom. I just know it as the Light on Life.
Yeah, it's a good snappy title. I always think non-fiction books they're the king of, or queen, whichever. They're the ruler of. They have like a really good snappy title, and then they have like a 3-line long subtitle.
Yeah.
That is often unnecessary. Yeah. No, definitely. But they do it. I think it's probably for search algorithms for online book
very true,
book buying, because obviously Amazon keeps all of that in there, and I suppose maybe it's, who can say? But yeah, I've read a lot of non-fiction books that have like a really great snappy title, which I think they could have stuck with, but then they've also got like the subtitle that's like 3 lines long that explains what the book's about. No, but yes, so a yoga book.
Yes, so I had this on my shelf for a long time. I've probably had it on my shelf since well before I did my yoga training, because it is apparently the book that all yoga teachers should read, so I feel a bit of a fraud I still haven't read it. Oh. Again, I think you sometimes have to be in the right space and mindset, and I'm thinking, if I've got all this time on my hands, then... that's what I'm going to do. And I've had it, I've got a copy of it, and I've got it on Audible, although there is other apps that you can listen to audiobooks I'm very aware of. And it's one that I know I'd probably get a lot of enjoyment, a lot of education out of. And he's kind of like, I don't know what you would call it. He's sort of the real sort of modern guru of it all.
Yeah.
There's lots of nice suggestions. In the book, there's images of different poses, there's the philosophy, and I just generally find it quite interesting anyway. So I was like, well, if I'm stranded and, I could do some yoga in front of my lovely fireplace.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a great time to fit it in. I mean, that's one thing I used to have like a lunchtime yoga class before the pandemic, and there was like a vacant space. That
goddamn pandemic.
It was a vacant space, and they brought the teacher in, and I used to go for lunch every week, and it was really, really nice, and I really enjoyed it. And I did a little bit more when I had my first child. I did the pregnancy yoga and that sort of thing in the run up to it. And I really, really enjoy it, but it's one of those things that I think I have to be going to classes to do it, because I'm not very good at like, I'm like you are with books, I'm like that with exercise. Like, if nobody can see me doing it, it's like a tree falling in the woods. Like, it didn't happen, basically. And it's more like, I don't even really like exercising with people. It's just more, I need to be forced to go and do it, basically.
It's definitely that accountability. And to be honest, I'm the same. I really enjoy going to classes. As you can see by my lovely building side of the home, like it's not the most pleasant place to sit and do yoga. I do it occasionally, but it's definitely something I do outside. But I like, because I'm quite an anxious person, I like all the philosophy around mindfulness and meditation. Yeah. And that is something that I can do, start on my settee or on my bed in different breathing techniques. And I think, like, not to go down a completely different tangent away from
by all means, we love
a
tangent.
My two passions, yoga and books, my main two hobbies, is that there's so much to yoga. I think in the West we see yoga and we see, unfortunately, white, skinny, flexible women doing yoga, and that's not what I'm big that it's yoga is for everybody. Whether it's someone that suffers with chronic pain or people, because some people can't even sit on the floor, so they think they can't do yoga, and I'm like, you can 100% do yoga. You're just going to do it from a chair. So it's me, and I just know that's something that I would continue, no matter where I am in life, will continue to want to read and learn about. Yeah. Because I don't think we ever stop learning. I love I say a self-help book, but I suppose it's an educational book. Like for me, I like those sort of books where you learn stuff and... Yeah,
self-help has got a bit of... It's one of those phrases that's kind of been...
stigma, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's got some stigma attached because of, I suppose, the kind of books people associate it with and that sort of thing. And I really enjoy, I mean, one of my things is like productivity and business, and similar to you, I mean, I've never read like the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which is one of those ones that everyone's supposed to have read if you're really into productivity. Right. And I'm just like, I've just never done it because I'm just like, it's a really old book. I just like, I'll probably get to it eventually, maybe. But I completely agree with like yoga. I think the spirituality around yoga is really, which because I'm not a very spiritual person, but what I enjoyed about it was that you have to kind of do it. You can. There is faster yoga. I think I've done some vinyasa classes which move very, very quickly.
They are very quick.
Move very quickly, and I was like, "Oh, this isn't the relaxing situation that I remember it being when I did it before." But I often feel like I'm living my life at like 300 miles an hour, and my brain never shuts up. And yoga is one of those things that because I actually have to concentrate what I'm doing, it kind of slows me down and actually. It's the closest thing to meditation I'm ever going to get to because I can't do actual meditation.
And I know so many people say that, and I say, like, if you like walking, jogging, swimming, I went for a swim today, and that for me is a bit of a meditation because like my phone's not next to me, it's in the locker, and I'm focusing on my breath, and you're just in that moment. It doesn't always have to be sat in stillness, and that's exactly what yoga is. So, but no,
I need to get better at walking without my headphones. I'm doing a digital declutter in February where I'm gonna try and not use my headphones as much because basically I've become allergic to the idea of doing one thing at a time. So if I'm doing something that's using my hands, I feel like I should be listening to a podcast or audiobook to like further better myself or something. Like I can't just clean up or just walk. I have to be doing
I'm the
something
same
else.
To be honest. Like, don't get me wrong, sometimes it's nice to have it switched off. But because my job, it makes it sound like I my job isn't very interesting, or I don't need a lot of skill to do my job. But because my job isn't sat at a computer or isn't sat reading, because I'm painting, I feel like listening to music or a podcast and audio, but it's actually a really good time to do it. And then cleaning as well. But there's definitely some activities I can't do whilst listening to, like I couldn't be writing invoices while I'm trying to listen to a podcast.
I think, very much of a tangent. I recently read the Digital Minimalist by Cal Newport, which is a really interesting non-fiction book that I do recommend people try out. But kind of reading it made me realise that I spend very little of my day in quiet. Like I constantly either have something in my ears or something on in the background, or someone talking to me or a toddler shouting at me. Like I'm very rarely in quiet, and realistically speaking, knowing my own brain, that's probably not very healthy for me. And I should probably spend some time alone with my thoughts, although I've recently started making fun of my husband because he doesn't listen to music in the car anymore. He drives around in silence.
What?
Yeah, and it's just like, and I think when he first started doing it, he's like, I'm just tired of listening to the same playlists all the time, so I've decided to just start driving around in silence like a serial killer.
It's like the beginning of a book. I love this.
So it's one of those, but like it's actually done so much, like it's like a kind of his own form of mindfulness that he just sort of focuses on driving and he doesn't listen to anything, and it actually kind of has really helped him. So it got me thinking. I'm like, no, I do have a problem. Like a lot of the time, my earphones serve a purpose because I'm blocking out external noise, but I'm also bringing in other noise.
It's a really good point. I hadn't thought about it before, but no, I feel like now I need to also read this book.
Yeah, it's a really interesting book. I don't pick up everything in it because I'm like that. I think the best non-fiction books don't force you to accept all of them or none of them. I feel like you should be able to pick and choose.
Yeah.
But yeah, that sounds like a really interesting book though. And if it's got things about like, the actual practice of yoga, I think it's a really fascinating story about how, it's sort of joined in and its original origins, not what's been adopted by quote unquote the West. The West of where is the centre? That's what, like it's something that's got quite deep and very sort of meaningful roots. So
I think if we, like you say, if we make it as accessible here, that people get a bit of something out of it. But no, it's a slightly chunkier read than the other one, so I was like, I'm thinking about what some of the other guests have said.
Paper. Okay, so that's you've got sci-fi, you've got non-fiction. What's the third book that you'll be taking with you?
This is a fiction book, but I've got no idea what kind of fiction you class it as. So 10 minutes and 38 seconds in this strange world by, is it Elon Schaffer? I know you've had Shafak, yeah. Basically, all the books I've picked authors that I can't say the surnames or names, so this will be a fun...
You've been very diverse and inclusive with your writing. You've not picked writers exclusively from your own nationality, so that's actually quite nice.
So this was a book I listened to in the lockdown that everyone knows of 2020, and it was again one that came up quite early in the start of the Dook Club. This is why I love Dook Club, because I never ever would have, if I'd seen this on a bookshelf, I would have been like, no, above my head. So the long and short of it, from what I can remember, because it's about 4 years since I listened to it, is it's about, I don't know whether this is her wording, I suppose we would call them sex workers now, not prostitutes, is found in a bin, or she's in a bin and she's dead. And it talks about how the brain still works, or is still, I don't know if you'd say powering down, or still aware, or still revisiting memories for 10 minutes and 38 seconds. So it sort of talks about her journey and how she ended up in this bin. And then it sort of ends with her friends kind of giving her, I suppose, the send-off or the respect that they felt like she deserved, that no one else, obviously, with her circumstances and what she did for work and where she was found, would give. I believe she's a Turkish writer, isn't she?
Yes.
Yeah. So I can't remember if it was all set there or not. That's what I mean. Like, this is another one that I picked because I still think about it, and I feel like I would reread it and get a lot from it. And it would be quite actually nice to physically try and read, or like listen and read along and see if I got more from it. This is the beauty of being like locked in a cabin, and I just can focus on books. So there's no distractions. And I just remember I used to lie in bed and listen to it every night, because again, like, lockdown was quite a lonely time for many people, and I was on my own with my dog. And it was just, I felt like the fact it kept me listening and almost kept me company. And this she writes so beautifully, and the characters are just so believably like there, and the connections, friendship, it was just such a beautiful book. And I know that like her writing since has come up. So she I can't remember what it's called now, it's just gone. It's the one about the fig tree, and I'm just like, and
I also don't, I'm terrible with new books.
Oh gosh, what's it called now? Because it was like which one do I pick up then? I was like, no, I feel like the one that I read longer ago I'd like to revisit. And I loved that as well, because my mum lived in Cyprus for a while when my granddad was in the RAF. And I, again, very naively, don't know an awful lot about history outside of what I was taught at GCSE about the typical Nazis and World War and all that sort of stuff. So
we've talked at length on the podcast about my opinion of the British school system on history.
So and I do find it really interesting, and like that you know, between the borders and stuff. And it was and again, she was writing it was the fig tree talking, and she's just a really beautiful writer.
I'll try again. Elif Shafak is one of those authors who, I mean, I may be mispronouncing that, or at least butchering it with my terrible accent, but...
I've got to say, so we're in the same boat.
But I've only read, I think, one of her books. I've read The Architect's Apprentice, which...
I've just added that to my wish list after listening to one of your podcasts.
It was one of my best books of 2023, because... she is one of those authors who, obviously it makes sense that she's critically acclaimed, because she's a really beautiful writer who... She uses words sparingly. She's not overly. I think, even though she's got such lyrical writing style, I don't think she overdoes it. I don't think her books are excessively long or wordy or flowery or full of unnecessary fluff. I think all of it kind of builds up the fibres of the fabric of it. It's like weaving almost. She's a really, really good writer, but. She's one of those. I can only imagine what it must be like to live in her head, because the number of stories, like the different stories and the way she sees the world, is obviously so uniquely her. And I think all of her books that I know of and that I've spoken to people about seem to have that baked into them. So, and this is one I've never heard of, actually.
Yeah. The Island of Missing Trees. That was the other one that I did.
The Island of Missing Trees.
That's definitely the one I'd take with me, and I feel like it ended up being like the top Duke's Choice of 2020, because the one beautiful thing that comes out of the club where we all read different books is what happens is someone turns up with a book and will be like, oh, I love it and talk about it, and then someone else will go, oh, I fancy that, and then before you know it, not everyone in the club, because obviously
it's made its way round.
because at the moment Notes of an Executioner seems really popular.
Yes.
Because like Nick was like, it's 5 stars, and then there's a couple of people. I'm just like 5 stars. Whereas there's some people that come
I'm quite generous with my stars as well.
I'm too generous because I'm just dead proud I finished a book and I enjoyed it. That I'm like,
oh, they did well. They finished a book. I finished a book. It's so good.
That's what I mean. And then I forget about it like a month later anyway. But there are like a select few members at Dook Club, and when they go, oh, I gave it 5 stars, we all turn and go, what?
Yes.
So when and that was definitely one of those books.
I think my issue is I put a lot of value on the amount of time and effort that goes into creating something. So even if I don't think it's very good or it's not to my taste, I still almost like, if it's a book that obviously took a lot of effort to write, I still almost like want to give them the 5 stars because I feel like they've earned it. Even though they're my
You've wrote more books than I ever have. So.
She's like, they're my opinion stars. I can give them how I please. But yeah, so that is, I mean, it's one of those, it's sort of like, she kind of writes literary fiction, but she also has like threads of sort of fantasy and magical realism and all sorts in there. She's I think she's a literary writer, if I had to box her into a genre. And
again, just never an author I ever would have thought I was capable of reading. Obviously, again, I know I listened to it, but I think people need to, if they don't give audiobooks already a chance, need to, because it opens up a whole different way of reading, especially if you're someone like me that just wouldn't get the same from a book if I tried to struggle through it.
And I think people who can be a little bit, dare I say, snobbish about audiobooks are forgetting about the long-held history of storytelling, which up until, the invention of the printing press was a oral tradition. People told stories by remembering them, hearing them, and then speaking them to other people, and that's how stories were passed on. And the idea that a story is only worth something if you read it written down on a piece of paper is actually quite a modern idea, and also not very true to the tradition of like sharing stories and that sort of thing. I don't think, and I mean, you mentioned reading ages earlier, and I just felt my hackles go up because like I've got nephews and younger siblings and that sort of thing who are going through the schooling system. I'm like, why do they insist on like ranking children?
I think last time I ever got tested, like, I don't know what my reading age is now, in the grand old age of 34 that I am, but the last time I was given a reading age, it was the reading age of, it's like 12 or 13. Yeah. So it's just like, but again, they put me off reading, which then slowed everything down. And now I feel like the past 4 years of getting into reading more, my reading is strengthened. The number of things that get said to me, because I had to get over the fear of reading in public. I bet people are like, you what? So I read at work on my lunch break, and I know it was through no malicious or anything, but my line manager, my gaffer, turned to me and he was like, you read? And I'm like, yeah. And he was like, but I thought you couldn't read. And I was like, no, it's not, I can't read. And I think as well, because I struggle reading, or it doesn't come as easily maybe as for some people. People then think that then I don't enjoy reading. Yeah. But I think it's just how you approach it. And that's kind of like, I found what works for me. And that's why maybe I'll never be into like any major classic books. And there's a lot of stuff out there that I haven't read because, I did theatre design. I do enjoy some Shakespeare stuff, but Jesus Christ, the bloke is confusing sometimes. He's heavy.
Well, I mean, Shakespeare's never been meant to be read, really. No, Shakespeare's meant to be seen, heard, and performed. So, it's not really. I mean, as much as I do have read some Shakespeare on a page, but that's because I've already seen those plays, because I feel like
so there's probably definitely stuff out there that I may or may not go, because again, I wasn't allowed to do English lit at school because I was in the lower band for So, you know when everyone talks
not
about
allowed to do that.
death of the salesman, and what's the other one? Everyone
mice and men.
Everyone, in spectacle. When everyone always talks about English lit things, I'm like, I didn't read. Mock him.
To Kill a Mockingbird.
Yeah, all that sort of stuff I didn't do.
To be fair, nothing can put you off a book more than having to study it. So you might have escaped some stuff there. I mean, I loved English literature, but there's some, like, I won't read any Ian McEwan now because of English literature. And he is like an award-winning author, and he's just immediately on the blacklist right there alongside like John Steinbeck. I'm like, I'm just not reading because of school. So yeah, you know what? It's not all good things. Okay, so what is the fourth book you were taking with you?
My fourth one is a fantasy book. And I must admit, again, fantasy is... I'm not going to say it's a genre I don't enjoy reading. I do, but it has to be right for me. There's some fantasy that just doesn't appeal to me. And I pronounce it Caraval, but I think people pronounce it differently, by Stephanie Garber.
Yeah, I've only known it as Caraval, to be fair. So I'm with you.
Yeah, and she's probably one of my favourite authors now, and someone that kind of got me back into reading, along with another author that I'll do on the honourable mentions. And this is the first of a trilogy, and I think it would be the one that I'd probably get most out reading standalone in my little lodge, because it was between that one and then her other trilogy, which is like a little bit newer, which is Once Upon a Broken Heart.
Yes, very pretty covers, very pretty editions. I'm familiar with those.
And again, I think I really like those stories, and they're probably my favourite with Evelyn Fox. Caraval is one that I read so long ago. Again, I feel like I just want to go revisit something that would feel a little bit newer to me. That's how I've gone about it. So it's about two sisters that have... Is he an abusive father or not a very nice father? And they live in this world that the author's created. And there's a story of a caraval or carnival that appears every, I can't remember so many years. This is what I mean. It's been so long since I've actually read the book. Yeah. And it's like a magical one. And I feel like I wish I had the book in front of me to read the back of it, because the back of that book describes it quite well. It's like careful what you believe, because I think there's a lot of illusion and magic. So it's basically a game. You go in and you play this game, and then someone gets a prize at the end of it from Legend, who is the carnival, the caraval master. And again, like quite a nice. There's a bit of romance in it, but there's also this relationship with the sisters, that love between two sisters, and what you would do for a family member. It's just again, I like her writing, and sort of obviously not believable fantasy. I know it's not like a real thing, but
it's not high fantasy. It's not wizards and wars and castles and
I think because.
Not to knock that, just for reference. I'm a big fan of my wizards and my castles.
I know it's obviously quite controversial now, but like I didn't do any of the Harry Potters till I was an adult, and I listened to them, because my problem with fantasy, not necessarily the unbelievable world of castles and dragons and stuff, because in her third lot of books there are baby dragons
gets
in
into
it.
That.
She does get some dragons in there. It's the made up words and names and places and descriptions of places. Sometimes I quite like when it's a real place but kind of like changed up a bit, because again, sometimes I struggle reading words that are real, never mind the words that are made up.
And that's completely understandable. And it does put a lot of people off, because I know I don't have my family aren't terribly well read, which meant like my vocabulary was not extremely broad. It wasn't very broad for growing up. So a lot of words that I learned from a young age was from reading, which meant I also mispronounced most of them, because I'd never heard them said out loud.
Exactly.
Because why would I have? And I used to get made fun of quite a lot for mispronouncing words, and I used to be quite self-conscious about it. I've only recently decided to go the opposite way and be proud of it.
Maybe I should do that, because I still mispronounce words all the time.
Well, my issue with it is usually the people who call you out on mispronouncing a word are correcting you. And my argument is the point of saying a word is to communicate something. If you understood what I was saying enough to correct my pronunciation, you knew what I was trying to say. Therefore, mission accomplished. We don't need to have a further conversation about it. Like, you knew what I was trying to say. So it can't have been that bad.
I feel like this is the conversation me and my partner have all the time. And he always goes to me, it's a good job I speak Kirsty. And I'm like, well, you knew what I was trying to tell you, so can we just drop it now?
Exactly. It's just, we've communicated. We have achieved our goal.
Yeah.
But I was the same with names a lot of the time, because I used to talk about it on the fact I'm a big fan of Percy Jackson, and Greek mythology is full of really hard to pronounce
Yeah, I can
names.
imagine, yeah.
Lots of sounds and vowels that we don't use very much in English. And yeah, it's tricky and it can put people off fantasy, but I do like... People seem to be bringing in slightly uncommon names as fantasy names instead of going really... instead of inventing their own language like J.R.R. Tolkien did with the Lord of the Rings.
That's one I've never ventured down because of this made up language, but actually... Again, now because of audiobooks, I am a bit more open to fantasy books. And if it's my kind of fantasy, I kind of know within the first couple of chapters. And I would say if you wanted to give her books a go, they are beautiful. And I would say Caraval is for the kind of people that like a little bit more magic and things kind of happening and a bit more, maybe a bit more adventure-y. And then the Once Upon a Broken Heart is for those people that want a little bit more romance and a love story. And there is definitely a love story weave through the Caraval books. I think it's Caraval, Legend and Finale are the 3 books.
Yes.
But yeah, it's definitely... Caraval is the one I would take with me.
Yeah, I remember they had a really big moment on sort of the internet book community for a while, and it was around about the same time that The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern was having their comeback. Yeah, still got that
on my Kindle to read.
So I enjoyed The Night Circus. It didn't connect with me the way it connects with many readers. But I tend to find that with books that have got a lot of hype around them, I immediately I don't connect with them the same way because of all of the hype.
I think that's quite common with a lot of people. I found
because you build something up that much, you can never possibly live up to what has been said about it. But I will say The Night Circus, I found it made a lot more sense when I stopped trying to figure out the timeline.
Right, so that's good to know.
So it's written out of order. I just stopped looking at the dates and locations. I was like, I will figure out where I am by reading the chapter. And
right, yeah, that would throw me a little bit,
to me, it made more sense than trying to flip back and put it in order in my own head. I basically just based on the characters you're with and the age of the characters you're with, you can figure out what's happened already and what you've had a preview of and that sort of thing. I just found it, when I went with the flow, it made more sense. But yeah, Caraval's very similar to Caraval. I think Caraval's possibly took a lot of inspiration. I may be speaking out of turn saying that, but they sound like very similar concepts.
I know people that have read both and people that have only read one and said they've heard similar things. And the reason I've picked some of my books as well is because some of them have kind of more personal sentiments to me. So Caraval was actually bought for me by a friend that I went to uni with, who I don't really see anymore, but we occasionally keep in touch. And she went into a bookshop, and to me this is just this was a lovely thing ever. She went into a bookshop and said, I've got a friend who is dyslexic. She likes a lot of YA stuff because of her ability to read, but she loves to read. Can you recommend a book for me? And so she went with the purpose of buying a book especially for me and then post it out to me with all these it was
that's
so
lovely.
That's another reason why I picked it.
A very, very good friend. We all need friends like that. Okay, so we're on the 5th and final book. What is the last book you're going to be taking with you?
So the last one is The Miracle of Mindfulness by Thich Nhat Hanh. So yeah, I feel like I've got so many different books going on in this little collection, but
no, I think they've all got. I do think there's quite a sort of spiritual, emotional sort of thread through all of them.
Yeah. Well, if it's anything like Lockdown, I'm going to spend a lot of time on my own, then I feel like they need to be books that are quite sentimental. So this is a book that was on my reading list when I did my mindfulness and meditation teacher training with Zen Ways. And Thich Nhat Hanh is Zen. He might even be a Zen Buddhist teacher, and it's a really, it's like, I should have brought it down from upstairs. A really tiny book. It's not very big, and it's translated from the I can't say the
Vietnamese.
Word. Thank you.
That was a guess, but
yeah, but I was like, I'm going to butcher this, and it's translated from a letter, and it's just so beautifully written. I've listened to it, and it's probably the book that I've gone back to the most. I've got it on Audible and the physical book highlight. And anyone that is familiar or has ever been to a yoga class or a meditation class, they'll be teaching from him that you don't realise it's him. He's like the grandfather of mindfulness. And he only passed away, I think, towards a couple of years ago. It might have been 2020 or 21. It wasn't that long ago. He's even got this little place in France called Plum Village or Plum Farm. And you can go out there and do like meditation retreats. And it's just all about the idea of mindfulness. And I think everyone, when they hear me say mindfulness, thinks it's this like hippy dippy thing that's really...
Yeah, people have their preconceived notions of mindfulness.
And all it is actually kind of what you've already touched on, was saying sometimes you need that kind of background noise. It's being okay in that moment of quiet and also in the activity. So the most famous story from this book is to wash the dishes. You know, are you washing the dishes to wash the dishes, or are you washing the dishes to have clean dishes? And it's like, people would be listening to this going, well, of course I'm washing them to have clean dishes. Yes, you are. But Thich Nhat Hanh's teaching is, if you're just washing them to get them done to go have your cup of tea or you're, you know, watch the telly afterwards, you're not in that moment. And life, unfortunately, is so short and so, you know, that we don't learn to be more mindful. So that's what that little book's about, and it's definitely one that I could like keep going back to and reading again.
Oh, that's nice. And it's probably one of those that revisiting it just reminds you of, because I mean, I've read a lot of non-fiction books that made a big impact on me, and I keep, you know, you find yourself dipping back into them just to remember, like, oh, what was that one thing they said about that one thing?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that's a really nice mix of books. Do you mind? You don't have to say all the authors, but
Thank
do you mind just recapping the titles? And then for the benefit of listeners, I will put the full list of titles and authors
and
in the notes.
Author names.
In the notes so they can find them.
So we started with Before the Coffee Gets Cold, and then The Light on Life, the yoga journey to all that other wording. 10 minutes and 38 seconds in This Strange World, Caraval, and The Miracle of Mindfulness.
Very nice, very, very thoughtful sort of... they'd be nice, relaxing books to just sort of like wallow in and think about. That'd be nice. Were there any books that you nearly added but didn't quite?
There were a couple, and I was like so adamant not to have like an honourable mention list, because I was like, you could just go down a rabbit hole, couldn't you?
Oh yeah.
So there's 3 that I'll mention. Again, I was thinking of books that I still kept thinking about. So a book I listened to, which was probably one of the longest books I've ever listened to, was a fiction book called Big Little Lies. I think it's a TV series now. And a friend recommended it to me. Oh my gosh, I could not press pause on that audiobook. It starts with a murder. All the best books do. And then it goes back 6 weeks to figure out, it's not clear who's died. And it's obviously trying to figure out it. And it's about these 3 women who have all different things going on. And I love it because at the end of each chapter, there was kind of like school gossip, because it's these 3 women that have kids in the same class at school. And it's just one of those books that proves that people's opinions and people's words aren't fact.
Yes.
And it really made you think in that respect. So that's one I still think about. And then I put Karen McManus. I just put Karen McManus. Okay. She was the one that got me back into reading. It took me a long time to read one of her books when we first went to lockdown. But my two favourite out of the ones that she's written, I know most people will know her for One of Us is Lying, but I really enjoyed Two Can Keep a Secret, or The Cousins. They were really nice, like ones on their own, and they're just they're YA like equivalent of like murder mystery and thriller.
Yeah, The Cousins is the sequel to One of Us is Lying, isn't it? Or it's connected to it.
Oh, is it? I didn't think the characters were.
I thought they were connected, but I might just be because they've got a similar style of cover. I could have just.
All her books are very similar styles. There's definitely 3 of the one. There's One of Us is Lying, One of Us is Back, and One of Us is something else. So they because
maybe not then. Maybe it was I read from the author of One of Us is Lying, and my brain my brain went yes, a sequel.
Yeah, because The Cousins was a bit different. I liked that one. That was one that I read quite quickly. So to me, that means I enjoyed it. And Two Can Keep a Secret, I really enjoyed. I also loved that for the first sort of chapter or first few pages, I didn't know if one of the twins in the story was male or female because of the name. I feel like in America, and I actually quite like that there's not, that it was quite open, and I was like, oh, it was like, until there was something that described, and I was like,
yes, until it became relevant to the plot.
Yes. And it had a bit of a Halloween theme. There was like an abandoned fun fair or something. There was like lots of little things that I just like. I was like, I like them. But I just like her writing, and I like her plot telling and her storytelling. I feel like if there's any like people out there that love a thriller or, you know, like a whodunit, a mystery one, and have got teenagers, that would be a really good place to like read together. Or so I really like them. And then the last one is a bit of a sentimental one because I can't really remember what happens in it, and my dad has dragged them out the loft for me to bring them down to Stoke next time he comes down. Me and my family have always pronounced it Pippi Langstocking, but I think people around here would know it's Pippi Longstocking. Don't ask me why it's been Langstocking. I don't know if it's the German pronunciation or what.
Very possibly. Yeah.
But these were the books that were read to me when I was younger, and they like, and I think one of the reasons I love audiobooks is because my stepmom is just so great at reading. She used to read me Anna Green Gables as well, and everyone had their own voices. And yeah, I don't remember them very much, but I was just like, oh, nostalgia makes me want to take a copy of Pippi Longstocking with me. So
very nice. Well, that's a really great list. Thank you so much for sharing your picks.
For having me. I hope this episode isn't the longest episode you've ever done.
Oh, it's very far from it. I think 3.5 hours is probably the longest one that we've got. But if people listening wanted to follow you on the internet, or maybe hear a little bit about, you know, yoga and reading and stuff, where might they be able to do that?
So Instagram is normally the place to find me. I am the Dyslexic Yogi on Instagram. And then the book club, Dook Club, is Dook.club, because I couldn't get Dook Club. And that, you know, I'm the same on sort of Facebook and Twitter and all that, but I tend to find that Instagram is like the place to be. I feel like it's
the easiest one. It's the one that feels like it causes the least amount of harm to log into. In my opinion, of course. Not that I don't want to anger anyone. But yeah, I will put both of those accounts in the podcast description so that people can find them. If people want to follow this podcast on social media, we're at Books to Last Pod, mainly on Instagram, similar, but I think on other platforms as well if you want to follow those, although they are slightly automated posts because I tend to stick to Instagram just because that makes my life easier. But yeah, so at Books to Last Pod, follow Kirsty over at the Dyslexic Yogi and at Dook Club, and yeah, thank you so much again.
Thank you for having me.
And until next time, listeners, bye for now.